Good, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Larry.
I want to thank the council for this opportunity to be here. And on behalf of Arcadis, I also want to thank the council and the staff for the opportunity to work with you on the BDCP evaluation over the past several years. It's been a rewarding experience. We've thoroughly enjoyed working with both the council subcommittee and with staff on this project. As Dan mentioned, I am backed up today by members of the Arcadis team. I'm glad they're here to be able to answer questions that I am unable to answer. But we have Bill Hinesley, Dr. Lucas Paz, and Jessica Ludi here to help me out. This portion of the presentation has to deals with how the Bay Delta Conservation Plan addresses the Delta Reform Act's goals and objectives. And in keeping with the introductory comments, I'd stress that this is not a legal review. This is from the perspective of both technical and scientific aspects of BDCP. And we were asked by the council to assess how the public draft of BDCP, and here we're talking about two separate documents, the BDCP plan documents and its accompanying environmental impact statement, environmental impact report, but how these documents relate to the goals that are established in the Delta Reform Act and the policies and the recommendations of the Delta plan. Quickly, just an overview of what BDCP is. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan is intended to be both a natural communities conservation plan under state statutes and a habitat conservation plan under federal statutes. It's a 50-year permit that would enable the construction of new conveyance facilities in the Delta. This includes 3 new intakes in the North Delta, twin tunnels that would be 35 miles long, connected to the existing South Delta pumping facilities, and would be operated with new operating criteria. Would also include dual operations. Approximately 50% of the flow would go through the new facility on an annual basis, and approximately 50% would continue in the through Delta means that it's been going through up to this point. In addition to the new conveyance facilities, which is conservation measure number 1, there is a conservation strategy to restore the Delta system consisting of 21 other conservation measures, and in total there will be approximately 140,000 acres of either new or protected habitat. And if approved, the BDCP will become part of the Delta Plan and will become eligible for funding, for public funding. To be approved, it needs to be approved as an HCP, a Habitat Conservation Plan, as an NCCP, Natural Communities Conservation Plan, and it must meet the specific requirements of the Delta Reform Act. I'd like to just highlight several of our key findings, and I think first it's fair to indicate that the goals and objectives in the BDCP with respect to are generally in conformance with the co-equal goals that are established in the Delta Reform Act and in the Delta Plan. The new facilities and operating criteria offer the possibility of system flexibility that could reduce reverse flows and decrease fish entrainment, which has been an historical problem in the Delta. And if the BDCP is successful, the conservation measures that are aimed at other stressors may be able to reduce the threats of risk from contaminants in runoff and in discharges, from invasive species, and from illegal harvest. The BDCP does propose to enhance water supply reliability in keeping with the co-equal goals, and in fact, the new facilities will be more resilient to natural disasters than the existing through Delta conveyance. The new facilities, including a new point of diversion and new operations criteria, do offer the opportunity to reduce reverse flow conditions in the Delta. And the new facilities also can contribute to a big gulp, little sip strategy in operations of the water supply. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan can contribute to a more reliable water supply from the Delta, but it is insufficient to fully meet the demand. And in addition, as conceived, and this is because it's not part of the BDCP, it does not contribute to other aspects of the Delta Reform Act, such as promoting statewide water conservation, diversifying local water supplies, and improving water use efficiency. We found that the BDCP could be made more effective with other water management actions that are currently viewed as being outside of the conservation plan. These actions will very likely be required due to the demands of climate change in the coming years, and they include reoperation of both the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. And in addition, BDCP could be more effective if there was an increase in storage, both either above or below ground, particularly south of Delta, but also north of Delta. The BDCP is not required to specifically address all of the Delta as a place goals that were included in the Delta plan, and we've found that it will have a mixed effect in achieving the Delta plan goals. The adequacy of the mitigation measures do affect BDCP's ability to contribute to the goals of the Delta plan, and we found that if BDCP could strengthen its commitment, would be more effective in mitigating adverse impacts to Delta communities. We looked at 4 other major environmental projects as part of the course of our work. These included the Everglades, the Lower Colorado, the Platte River, and the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Act. And we found that in comparison, features of BDCP governance have contributed to success in these other similar restoration programs for large aquatic system. We do think that improved coordination with the Delta Stewardship Council, the Delta Science Program, the Independent Science Board, and I might add other science program within the Delta will certainly benefit the implementation of BDCP. And we found that based largely on our review of work done by the Legislative Analyst's Office, that BDCP's budget overall appears to be reasonable. It appears to be properly allocated, although details are yet to be provided in an implementation agreement. The sources of funding are plausible but are not guaranteed, particularly those for the ecosystem restoration. And because of potential concerns for regulatory assurance, the budget may prove insufficient and the state may face additional cost if the restoration efforts do not succeed as planned. The Legislative Analyst's Office also found that potentially the cost of real estate acquisition could be underestimated because of BDCP's own demand for real estate within the Delta. We took a look at the adaptive management. You'll hear more about that from other presenters. It's certainly an important tool to be able to address uncertainties and be able to improve the opportunities for success. The adaptive management plan as presented in BDCP is generally consistent with the 9-step plan in the Delta plan, but would certainly benefit from interaction and coordination with the Stewardship Council and the Delta Science Program and other sciences programs to have an active role in defining the details of the adaptive management and the implementation of it. We found that the adaptive management as proposed would benefit from a more proactive approach, a wider use of large-scale experimentation. In order to be successful, the adaptive management needs to be accompanied by timely adjustments so that it can contribute overall to success. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that while the adaptive management is crucial to the success of BDCP, it is not a panacea, and it's not something that should be counted upon as the complete safety factor in the event that things don't work out as planned. It doesn't relieve the need for appropriate mitigation of adverse impacts that's planned in advance. The governance of BDCP is illustrated on this slide from the documents. The central portion, I'd like to just point out a couple of highlights. The central portion is the implementation office, headed up by a program manager, and it includes a science manager. The implementation office is directed by the authorized entities group, the purple box at the top. The authorized entity group comprises generally all the water agencies, including the water contractors, and off to the right-hand side is the permit oversight group, which is the fish agencies. And importantly, there's a stakeholders council that's available to advise the implementation office. Stakeholders council is an opportunity for local Delta people, other agencies, and NGOs to provide input to the implementation office. In general, we saw that the governance offered some benefits. The authorized entity group does provide for oversight and accountability, and the permit oversight group does serve as the final authority for changes. We found with our study of other large projects, restoration projects in aquatic systems, that the process of development of annual work plans and development of budgets can be successful in improving focus and coordination. There's also a number of concerns identified with the potential governance. One is that the program manager has a significant amount of responsibility but limited authority. The implementation office itself lacks contracting authority, which means that it's going to have to refer back to the authorized entity group in order to enter into contracts, whether they be for real estate acquisition or construction or design. And the implementation office really has no role at all in two of the major conservation measures, CM1, which is the conveyance and intake facilities, and CM2, which is the work in Yolo bypass. We've got a number of concerns that have been identified with the BDCP. I think it's fair to say that the key concern is the uncertainties that are associated with BDCP. First, there's the presentation of conservation measures. This is CMs 2 through 22, other than the conveyance facilities, are presented at the programmatic level. There's a lack of specific location and design details, which makes it very difficult to assess the actual benefits that will accrue to covered species because of the vagueness in the programmatic level descriptions. It's also very hard to assess the impacts that would flow, such as impacts to agriculture and cultural resources within the delta. The benefits of habitat restoration may be overstated. There's an implicit trade of water for habitat here, and the benefits of the actual restoration on the covered fisheries may be overstated. Certainly, we found that the timelines for achieving the benefits may be overly optimistic by as much as perhaps 10 years in the time that it takes to acquire the land, make the designs, do the construction, and realize the benefits from the restoration may be significantly overstated in BDCP. Modeling, of course, is a major concern. The uncertainties in modeling and the compounding of uncertainties may make it difficult to accurately predict what those outcomes actually can be. And then also of real importance is the significant uncertainties about the availability, reliability, and sources of funding for the restoration measures in the long term. Some other key concerns with BDCP, it does improve water supply reliabilities for users of water that's exported from the Delta, but because of water quality concern, it may not improve reliability for users of in-Delta water. The requirement for consensus in the adaptive management program may actually delay actions if the decisions are not made in a timely manner. The mitigation for potentially adverse impacts should not be deferred to the adaptive management phase, echoing what I said earlier, that adaptive management is not a panacea. The mitigation should be planned in advance, and adaptive management should be used to adjust as we learn how that mitigation is working. And then the resilience and recovery of conveyance facilities from levee failure is not addressed, and this does constitute 50%, roughly 50% of the flow, which is through Delta. Other concerns with BDCP include the fact that many of the implementation details are not yet available for review. This may actually answer some of our questions and concerns. There's a challenge in achieving balance between the co-equal goals. On the water supply reliability side, the benefits to the water users will actually begin as soon as water is diverted by the intakes into the new conveyance facilities. But on the other hand, the benefits to the ecosystem may not be realized for perhaps 20 years or more, and it begs the question, what if the restoration does not work as anticipated? Have we achieved the balance, the desired balance in the co-equal goals? And also of significant importance is the regulatory assurances and whether they're commensurate with the conservation assurances. The fish agencies are empowered by the regulations to provide regulatory assurances, and BDCP is asking for a 50-year permit. The payback point for the investments in the conveyance facilities, by our analysis, looks to be approximately 40 years, and it's certainly reasonable for contractors to be seeking some level of security in their investments. But is that appropriately balanced with the assurances that the ecosystem will be developed and in a successful manner within the same time frame? The fish agencies are able to provide that regulatory assurance based on the appropriateness of the plan, and particularly with respect to the quantity and quality of the data, the level of knowledge and the use of the best available science through the plan, and as emphasizing here again the funding issues, the sufficiency of funding of the plan and its contingencies. We've called these recommendations, clearly they're perhaps food for thought, both for the council and for the BDCP agencies, but we'd like to see that there are feasible and enforceable mitigation measures specified for the water quality, the adverse water quality impacts, and if specific mitigation cannot be offered, then detailed performance standards should be offered instead. We'd like to see a more thoroughly identified specific mitigation measures for many of the adverse impacts that we'll see to the Delta as a place, including agriculture, recreational impacts, impacts to community character, and impacts to aesthetics and cultural resources. We think it's important that if we could reduce uncertainties in certain ways, we would achieve a better balance of the co-equal goals. If we could have increased confidence that the restoration measures will in fact work as intended, that would improve would improve our chances of having a better balance between the co-equal goals. And one way to do that would be to use a much larger scale of experimental approach in the development of the restoration opportunity areas as opposed to small scale experiments. We think that the BDCP would benefit from improved guidance on timing, location, and design details for many of the conservation measures that are now presented only at the programmatic level. And of course, we'd like to see improved confidence in the funding of restoration measures. We'd like to see improvements in the adaptive management program, and the Independent Science Board has offered some recommendations in that regard. But of concern is the assurance of timely decision making in the adaptive management program, and then some to ensure that the conservation assurances, in fact, are commensurate with the regulatory assurances. And we'd be glad to take your questions. Thank you.
Larry, just